"She's pregnant, Adrian. Or hadn't your little caterer thought to mention it?" The words landed in the middle of the terrace like a glass dropped on marble, and for one breath the whole summer gala seemed to hold its air. 200 candles guttered in the warm July wind off the harbour. A string quartet kept playing, unaware, and Elena Marsh, standing behind the champagne table with a tray balanced on her palm, felt every eye in the Vale Group's annual benefit turn toward the curve she had spent 4 months learning to hide beneath an apron. What Adrian Vale did in the next 3 seconds would either shield the woman by the ice sculpture or unmake them both in front of everyone who mattered to him, and he had never in his life been given less time to decide. Rewind. If you want to understand how a caterer came to be standing under 200 candles, carrying a billion-dollar secret, it starts 3 weeks earlier, on the hottest morning of the summer, in a kitchen that smelled of scorched sugar and panic. Elena, the Barata's turned. The van won't start, and the woman from the Vale account just called twice. Priya said all of it in one breath, the phone still pinned to her shoulder, flour to her elbows. "Please tell me you have a miracle in that head of yours." Elena set down the piping bag and pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of her nose, the way she did when the day arrived all at once. The window unit rattled behind her, losing its war with the heat. Outside, the loading dock shimmered. "The burrata we swap for the whipped ricotta. Nobody at a summer benefit counts cheeses," she said. "The van we deal with after." What did the Vale woman want? She wants to move the tasting to today. This afternoon. At the estate. The piping bag slipped. Elena caught it against her hip and told herself the small lurch under her ribs was the heat and nothing else. Today, 2 o'clock. She said Mr. Vale likes to approve the menu himself now. Priya finally lowered the phone. Since when does a man worth 11 figures taste his own knaps? Since he learned that the people who bring the food are the people who see everything, Elena thought, and did not say. She wiped her hands slowly on the towel at her waist. She had built Marsh & Co. out of 1 rented oven and a used van and 11-hour days, and she had built it in this city precisely because it was large enough to lose a person in. Large enough, but the odds of a boutique caterer and the man who owned half the skyline ever standing in the same room again were, she had decided long ago, comfortingly small. The odds had just called twice. "Send Diego to the tasting," she said. "He knows the menu cold. Diego's doing the Hoffman wedding. There's only you." Priya tilted her head, and something in Elena's face must have shown, because her voice softened. "Is it the Vale thing? You went pale as the ricotta. It's the heat." Elena untied the apron, retied it looser. A small dishonesty she performed a dozen times a day now. "I'll go. It's 1 afternoon. I say yes to the food. I smile. I leave." She did not know yet that saying yes to the food would cost her the one secret she had left. The Vale estate sat on a bluff north of the city, where the river widened toward the Sound, and the drive up to it was a 1/4 mile of crushed white shell that hissed under the tires like the whole property was telling her to hush. Cedar and salt on the wind. Roses somewhere, heavy in the heat. Elena parked the coughing van beside a fountain that probably cost more than her lease, and sat for a moment with both hands on the wheel, breathing the way the midwife had taught her. In for 4, hold, out for 6. One afternoon, she told the rearview mirror. The woman in it did not look convinced. The housekeeper who met her at the service door was built like a woman who had run larger households than this one and buried nobody's foolishness. Silver hair, pressed collar, a ring of keys that announced her before she spoke. "You're the caterer," the woman said. "You're early. I approve of early. I'm Rosa. Kitchen's this way, and mind the 3rd step, it's loose and Mr. Vale keeps forgetting to have it seen to, which tells you everything about how often he actually walks through his own back door." Elena Marsh. She followed the keys down a cool stone corridor that smelled of beeswax and lilies. Does he do that often? Forget the things right in front of him? Rosa shot her a look over one shoulder, sharp and amused. You'll find out. You've got a face that notices. That's either going to make you very good at this job, or very tired. She pushed open a door onto a kitchen, the size of Alina's entire commercial unit, marble, copper, a range with more burners than she had pans. Set up here. He'll come down when he comes down. He always comes down. Elena laid out the tasting with hands that knew their work, even when the rest of her was somewhere else. The chilled melon with basil and a whisper of chili. The little cones of smoked trout, the ricotta she was quietly proud of. The window over the sink framed a lawn that rolled green and gold to a line of blue water. A sprinkler ticked. A gull complained. It was, she thought, exactly the kind of beautiful that had nothing to do with her, and she had made a peace with that beauty months ago, in a hotel corridor, walking away from the man who owned it. Then the loose third step creaked, and she did not have to turn around to know. Rosa said the caterer was early, Adrian Vale said. She approves of early. She disapproves of almost everything else, so I've learned to. He stopped. Elena turned with a canap in her hand, and her whole face arranged into the professional warmth she gave every client, and it held for exactly as long as it took him to say her name. Elena. 4 months since she had heard him say it. He looked the way expensive things look, the pale summer suit, no tie. The cuffs turned back on his forearms as though he'd been about to do something with his hands and forgotten what. But he looked tired underneath it, in a way the suit couldn't fix, and she hated that she noticed, because noticing was how all of this had started the first time. Mr. Vale, she set the canap down. I didn't know it was your account. I'd have sent my partner. You'd have sent someone else. He said it quietly, not a question, and the accuracy of it sat between them like a third person in the room. You've done that before. Sent someone else so you wouldn't have to be where I was. I run a business. I go where the business is. She picked up the melon, offered the plate, kept her voice level as a countertop. Try this. Basil from the market this morning. Tell me if it needs salt. He didn't look at the plate. He looked at her, and then, because he had always been a man who read a room the way other men read a balance sheet, his eyes moved, just slightly, down, to the apron. To the way she stood half-turned, one hip to the counter, an angle a woman learns without deciding to. Elena. The melon. Miss. Vale. You changed how you're standing. It's a long day, and I'm on my feet. She pushed the plate an inch closer. Salt or no salt. For a moment she thought he would let it go, the way he had let so much go between them, all the words neither of them had said in that hotel corridor. Then Rosa's voice sailed in from the corridor. Adrian. The florist is on the phone about the terrace, and she is not a patient woman, and he broke the look to answer, and Alina breathed. And the afternoon might have survived if the melon had needed salt. It did not need salt. He came back. He tasted it. He said, "It's perfect. It doesn't need anything." And there was so much in the way he said it that she had to turn to the sink and run water over her hands, just to have somewhere to put her eyes. "Do the benefit," he said behind her. The July Gala. "My people will pay whatever you ask, and I'll tell them not to negotiate, which will horrify my chief financial officer, so please, take advantage of it. I don't need charity, Mr. Vale. It isn't charity. It's the best trout I've had in this house, and I'd be a fool to let pride cost me a good caterer." A pause. And then, lower, "I've done enough of that. Letting pride cost me things." She shut off the water. She could say no. She could stand in this borrowed kitchen and refuse the largest single event her small company had ever been offered, and protect the secret under her apron for a few more weeks, and go back to the rattling window unit and the van that wouldn't start. Or she could say yes, and take the money that would keep 11 people employed through the slow autumn, and trust that she could get through one July night at the far end of a champagne table, without the man 20 feet away ever learning the truth. "Elena," Rosa called, gentler now, from the doorway. "There's lemon water in the cold press if you're wanting it. You've a look about you. This heat's no friend to anyone doing real work in it." "Thank you, Rosa." Elena dried her hands. She looked at Adrian, at the tired underneath the beautiful, at the man who had noticed how she was standing and for once, in his careful life, had chosen not to press. "I'll do your gala," she said. "Trout and ricotta and the melon that doesn't need salt. And then we're square, Mr. Vale, client and caterer. Nothing else." "Nothing else," he agreed. He didn't mean it. She could hear that he didn't mean it. She chose, for the length of one afternoon, to pretend she couldn't. She should have known better. She had learned, 4 months ago, exactly how much it cost to pretend around Adrian Vale. They had met 18 months back, before any of this, at a rain-drowned charity auction, where the caterer had walked out mid-service, and Alina had stepped in with nothing but a borrowed jacket and a refusal to let 200 people go hungry over someone else's tantrum. He had found her in the kitchen at midnight, sleeves rolled, plating the last of the desserts by herself, and instead of the thanks, she expected he had picked up a spare piping bag and, badly, ruined 4 plates trying to help. "You're making it worse," she'd told him. "I'm aware. I'm a billionaire. We're not known for our pastry work." He'd set the bag down. "But I couldn't stand in a doorway watching someone work while I did nothing. My father did that his whole life. Watched people work. I promised myself I'd be the kind of man who at least ruins 4 plates trying." That was the sentence that undid her. Not the money, not the name on the building she could see from her apartment. The 4 ruined plates. They had been quiet about it, because he was a headline, and she was a woman who liked her name only on invoices. 6 months of it. Late kitchens and early markets, and a version of Adrian Vale that no board meeting ever met. The one who laughed with his whole chest. Who kept her worst attempt at a souffle in his freezer like a trophy. Who told her once, at 3 a.m. with the city glittering below, that she was the first person in years who wanted nothing from him he could sign a check for. And then his mother's illness, and the board's demands, and the slow, terrible arithmetic of a man being told that the woman he'd chosen was a liability the family name could not afford. She had heard it herself, not meant to. But the door was open, his uncle's voice in the study, cool as the marble. "A caterer, Adrian, do you understand what they'll write? She'll be a footnote in the merger. Send her a generous gift, and be done." And Adrian, silent. Adrian, who could out-argue any room in the country, saying nothing at all. She had not waited to be sent a generous gift. She had left a note on the kitchen island, "Thank you for the 4 plates," and walked out through a hotel corridor at dawn, and she had gotten as far as the elevator before she realized she was carrying something out of that penthouse that no note could give back and no board could vote on. She had known for 8 weeks now. She had told exactly one person, the midwife and the burrata delivery guy by accident, and no one else in the world. Least of all the man who had let his uncle's arithmetic speak for him. One July night, she told the rearview mirror again, on the Shell drive down from the estate, the tasting containers rattling on the seat beside her. "You get in, you feed 200 people, you get out." The mirror still didn't believe her. Neither, if she was honest, did she. The night of the gala arrived warm and enormous, the kind of high summer evening that makes even careful people generous. By 7 the Vale Terrace was a field of light, candles in hurricane glass down the length of every table, lanterns strung between the cedars, the harbour going from gold to rose to deep blue behind it all. It smelled of sea salt and beeswax, and the white roses Rosa had banked along the balustrade. Alina worked the back of house in her good black dress, and a longer apron than usual, moving trays, tasting sauces, keeping her people calm, keeping her body angled away from the room. "You're doing it again," Rosa murmured, appearing at her elbow with a tray of empty flutes. "Standing like you're hiding a state secret." "I'm standing like my feet hurt." Rosa's eyes did a slow, kind, terrifying inventory, and then, because she was a woman who had run larger households than this and buried nobody's foolishness, she said only, "There's a stool behind the ice table. Sit when you can. And drink the lemon water, not the champagne, though I suspect you already knew that." Alina's heart went still. "Rosa, I don't need telling," the older woman said softly, patting her arm. "I've watched women carry more than trays across this terrace. Your secret's yours to give, not mine to spill. Now, the trout's going fast. That's a compliment. She might have made it. That is the thing Alina would turn over and over later. She was so close to making it. The trout went fast. The ricotta went faster. The quartet played. And Adrian moved through his own party, like a man performing a role he'd outgrown, shaking hands, saying the right thing, his eyes finding the back of the terrace, again and again, where the caterer refused to look up. And then, Vanessa Cole arrived at the champagne table. Vanessa, who had grown up on the next bluff and had been penciled into the Vale family's plans since before either of them could vote. Vanessa, in silver, with a smile like the edge of a good knife and a talent for finding the one crack in any room. She had watched Adrian watch the caterer all night. She had done the arithmetic that uncles do, and she had waited, the way patient, cruel people wait, for the moment the music dipped between songs. "You," she said, setting an empty flute down in front of Alina, "were at the Harbour Line auction 18 months ago. The rain. You wore a man's jacket." Her head tilted. "You've filled out since." "Ricotta and long hours," Alina said, taking the flute, keeping her voice pleasant, her hands steady. "Can I get you a fresh glass?" "No." Vanessa's eyes traveled down, unhurried, expert. And Elena saw the exact half-second the woman understood what the apron was for. Saw the delight arrive. Saw her turn, deliberately, her clear voice pitched to carry across the little valley of tables, just as the quartet lifted their bows, and the terrace went briefly, fatally quiet. "She's pregnant, Adrian. Or hadn't your little caterer thought to mention it?" And there it was, the sentence from the top of the night, landing now in full, 200 candles, 200 faces, the harbour breeze. The last note of the quartet dissolving into a silence, so complete Alina could hear the sprinkler ticking on the far lawn. She did not drop the flute. She would be proud of that later. In the small hours, when she catalogued the wreckage, she had not dropped the flute. She set it down. She put both hands flat on the cool linen of the champagne table and made herself look up, past Vanessa's silver triumph, across the frozen tables, to the one face in all of it she had spent 4 months and one whole afternoon not looking at. Adrian had gone perfectly still. A glass hung forgotten in his hand. And on his face was not the calculation she'd braced for, not the boardroom blankness, not the arithmetic, but something raw and far more dangerous to her. The look of a man watching a door open onto a room he hadn't known was in his own house. "What did you say?" he said. Not to Vanessa. To the heir. To Elena. Adrian, his uncle's voice, somewhere to the left, low and warning. Not here. He didn't hear it. He was already moving, setting the glass down on a stranger's table, coming toward the back of the terrace, and the crowd was turning its 200 faces to follow him like flowers tracking the sun. And Alina thought, with the strange calm that arrives when a thing you've dreaded finally simply happens, there is nowhere left to angle myself away. Elena, he stopped an arm's length from the champagne table. Up close, the tired under the beautiful was all she could see. His voice came out low, stripped, meant for her, and reaching half the terrace anyway. Is it true? She could lie. The whole apparatus of her careful life leaned toward the lie. One word, and she could keep the secret a little longer. Keep the boy or girl under her apron, a matter between herself and a midwife and the burrata delivery guy. Keep Adrian Vale a client, and nothing else the way she'd sworn on a shell drive 3 weeks ago. But he had ruined 4 plates once because he could not stand in a doorway and watch. And she had never, not once in 18 months, been able to lie to the face that made that choice. Adrian, she said quietly. Not here. Please, not in front of. Is it mine? The question left him like something torn. Behind him, Vanessa's smile had begun, very slightly, to curdle, because this was not the humiliation she had ordered. And behind Vanessa, Adrian's uncle was already reaching for his phone, already doing the newer, colder arithmetic, because a caterer was a footnote. But a caterer carrying the only veil Heir was something the family name could neither buy off nor vote away. The harbour breeze moved through the candles. Somewhere the quartet's leader, God help him, lifted his bow to start the next song, and then thought better of it. 200 people waited. Rosa stood at the edge of it all with a tray of empty flutes, and her chin lifted like a woman ready to catch whatever fell. Elena looked at the father of the one she had meant to raise alone, and she made the choice that could not be unmade. Not the lie that would have saved the night, but the truth that would cost her every quiet thing she had built. "Yes," she said, "it's yours." The word did what words do at that altitude. It traveled. Elena watched it move across the terrace in a ripple of turned heads and lifted phones, watched the quartet leader finally lower his bow for good, watched 200 people arrange their faces into the polite masks that rich people wear over their hunger for a story. The candles burned on. The harbour breeze kept coming, salt and cedar, indifferent. For one more breath Adrian did not move at all. Then he did the thing she had not braced for, because she had spent 3 weeks bracing for the wrong man. He did not step back. He did not look to his uncle, or to the ring of guests, or to the woman in silver whose smile had gone thin as a wire. He took off his jacket, the pale summer jacket with the cuffs he was always forgetting, and he laid it across the champagne table in front of her, over the linen, a small pale wall between her body and the room. "You're cold," he said. It was 78 degrees, and the night was thick with July. He said it anyway, loud enough for the front tables. "Rosa, take Miss Marsh through to the library. She's been on her feet since 2. "Already moving," Rosa said. And she was, the tray of flutes abandoned on the balustrade, one warm, dry hand closing over Elena's wrist. Adrian. His uncle arrived at his shoulder, the way weather arrives, low and grey and inevitable. Silver at the temples, a benefactor's smile still bolted to the lower half of his face, for the benefit of the watchers. Under it his voice was a blade wrapped in felt. "You will smile, you will thank your guests, and you will let the staff manage the staff. Whatever this is, it is not a thing you do on a terrace. Take your hand off my arm, Charles. I haven't touched you. Then don't start." Adrian didn't raise his voice. That was the thing about him she had forgotten and now remembered all at once. He got quieter as a room got louder, until people leaned in to hear the man who owned the floor they stood on. Vanessa Cole lifted her chin. "I only said what everyone could see. You set a glass down in front of a working woman and made a spectacle of her body for sport." He looked at her the way a man looks at a stain he is deciding whether to bother naming. "You've done me one favor tonight, and exactly one. Now go home. Adrian, go home. Vanessa." The silver smile fractured, just at one corner, and Elena, being led away. Rosa's hand steady on her wrist, caught the precise moment Vanessa understood she had aimed a knife and hit her own hand. It should have felt like triumph. It felt like nothing. It felt like the long, numb quiet after you finally set down something you have carried too far. Then the cool of the house closed over her, beeswax and lilies, and the terrace and its 200 candles were only a gold blur through a leaded window. The library smelled of old paper and lemon oil, and faintly, of the roses coming in through a cracked casement. Rosa steered her to a leather chair the colour of strong tea and put a glass of the cold-pressed lemon water into her hands and stood over her with her arms folded until Elena drank. "There," Rosa said. "You've a bit of colour back. You went the shade of the good tablecloths out there. I ruined his party. You did no such thing. A woman in silver ruined his party, and she's about to spend a long drive home discovering it." Rosa pulled a footstool over without asking and lifted Elena's aching feet onto it, brisk as a nurse. "You'll not stand again tonight. I've a girl watching the trout, and the world will keep turning without you plating it." "Rosa." Elena's voice came out thin. You knew. 3 weeks ago, in the kitchen. You knew and you didn't. I knew a tired woman was carrying more than a tray, and I know that a secret is a thing you set down when you're ready, and not 1 minute before. The older woman's face softened out of its briskness into something that had, somewhere behind it, its own long-ago summers. I've had my own, set them down in my own time. I wasn't about to pick yours up for you. The door opened. Adrian came in and shut it behind him, and stood with his back to it a moment, as though holding the whole terrace out of the room by the weight of his shoulders. Without the jacket, he looked younger and less armored. He looked, Elena thought, like the man in the midnight kitchen with the ruined plates, and she hated how much she had missed that man and how little she could afford to. "Rosa," he said. "Thank you. Could you?" "I could." Rosa was already at the door. She stopped level with him and looked up, and whatever passed between the housekeeper and the man she'd clearly watched grow up was too old and too dry for Elena to read. "Gently," was all Rosa said. "She's had a night. So have you. Gentleness costs you nothing, and you can well afford it." And then she was gone, and the door clicked, and it was only the two of them and the smell of roses and 4 months of unsaid things. Adrian didn't come closer. He stood by a globe on a brass stand and put one hand flat on the top of it, steadying himself against a world he could spin with a finger. "How long?" he said. "Adrian, how long have you known?" She could measure it in the weeks she'd counted, in the appointments, in the sonogram folded in a drawer under her leases. She gave him the plain number, because plain numbers were the only ground she trusted. 11 weeks. 11 weeks. He said it as if she'd struck him somewhere that didn't show. And this afternoon, 3 weeks ago, in the kitchen. "You stood there and told me the melon didn't need salt and you were carrying." He stopped. His hand went still on the globe. "You were going to cater my gala and let me approve the trout and walk out of my house, and I would never have known. That was the plan." She would not soften it. Softening it would be another dishonesty, and she was so tired of the small ones. Yes, why? And there it was, the question with no floor under it, and she felt the old anger come up through the tiredness, like heat through a stovetop, clean and almost welcome. "Because I heard him," she said. "Your uncle. 4 months ago, in your study, the night your mother took her turn for the worse. The door was open, Adrian. I wasn't listening at keyholes. I was bringing up the tea Rosa asked me to bring up, and I heard him tell you what I was." Her voice held level, but her hands had closed on the cold glass. "A caterer, a footnote in the merger. He told you to send me a generous gift and be done. And you said nothing. You, who outtalk every room you walk into. You stood in your own study and you said nothing at all. The silence between them had weight now, physical, like the July air off the water. You heard that," he said. "I heard all of it. And you left a note on the island." His jaw moved. "Thank you for the 4 plates. I kept it. I have it in a drawer in the city like a—" He shook his head once. "Sharp. You heard him tell me to send you away. And you decided you'd save me the trouble. I decided I wouldn't wait to be a line item." She lifted her chin. "I've built something out of one oven and a van that won't start, and I did it in this city, because it's big enough that a woman like me and a man like you never have to stand in the same room twice. I wasn't going to be managed, Adrian. I wasn't going to be a problem your family solved with a check." And the child. His voice dropped, and she heard it cost him. "You weren't going to be managed, so you were going to raise my child on your own in a walk-up over a rattling window unit, and never tell me it existed." "It's mine too." She stopped. That wasn't true either, not anymore, not with him standing there gone pale under the beautiful. "I didn't know how to tell you something you'd already decided you didn't want. I never decided that." He came off the globe then, 1 step, 2, and stopped himself as though there were a line on the carpet he wasn't allowed to cross. "You heard my silence, and you filled it in with the worst thing. You wrote the whole ending out of one thing I didn't say, and you never gave me the—" He broke off. pressed the heel of his hand to his eyes for 1 second. When he lowered it, his composure was back. But she could see it now for what it was, a lid on a pot. You don't know what I said to Charles after you left that hallway. You weren't there for that part. You'd already decided you knew the story. Then, tell me the story. Not tonight. He turned toward the window, toward the gold blur of his own ruined party. Tonight there are 200 people on my terrace with phones, and by morning there will be a photograph of my jacket on your table with a caption I can't control, and the one thing I will not do is give them a second scene through this glass. He turned back. Where do you live now? You moved. Rosa said your invoices changed address. I'm not going to appear at your door with flowers and a lawyer, if that's what the flinch is for. I'm asking so that I know one true fact about you tonight, because I seem to be short on those. Something almost like the old dryness came into his voice, tired and rueful. Humor me. Give the Billionaire 1 address. We're not known for our pastry work, but we're excellent at knowing where things are. Against everything, against the tiredness and the anger and the 4 months, the corner of her mouth moved. You ruined 4 plates, she said, and you've never let me forget it. I keep the sofal in my freezer to this day. Freezer burned to a brick. He almost smiled. It didn't reach the tired. Elena, where do you live? She told him the neighborhood, not the number, and watched him accept the half-truth as a fair trade for the night. It was, she would think later, the last easy moment they were given before the harder machinery of his world woke all the way up, because the library door opened again without a knock, and Charles Vale came in with his phone in his hand and the benefactor's smile entirely gone. It's already moving, Charles said, ignoring Elena as completely as a man ignores furniture. 3 accounts. 1 with the jacket, 1 with the audio. Someone caught the girl in Silver's little announcement clean. By the 9 o'clock markets there will be a name attached to the words, Vale Heir, and it will not be a name our partners in the East Terminal deal have ever vetted. He finally turned his grey eyes on Elena, and they did the exact arithmetic she'd heard through a study door 4 months ago, only faster now and colder. Miss Marsh, you've had a shock. Sit. We'll have someone drive you home, and tomorrow we'll talk properly, with people whose job is to make nights like this one disappear. Charles, a warning. You'll thank me in a week. Charles didn't look away from Elena. Miss Marsh strikes me as a practical woman. She built a business out of nothing, that takes sense. And sense knows that a child is best served by an arrangement that protects it, provides for it, and keeps it well clear of a boardroom that would use it as a chip in a game she doesn't play. He set a cream-colored card on the arm of her leather chair, precise as a man laying down a winning hand. My associate. She'll call you a car. And she'll explain what generosity looks like when it's done correctly. Elena looked at the card and did not touch it. The last time this family had priced her, she had left a note and walked out through a hotel corridor. She had promised herself she would never again let anyone in a good suit set a number on the thing she loved. I don't need your car, Mr. Vale, she said. My van's out back. It doesn't always start, but it's mine, and everything in it is mine, including the thing you're trying to buy a share of. She stood, slowly, refusing the wobble her legs offered. You told him 4 months ago I was a footnote. I heard you. So you'll understand why I don't take cards from a man who's already decided how my story ends. For a moment Charles Vale simply looked at her, recalibrating, the way a man does when a number he entered turns out to have another digit. You were listening, he said, not embarrassed. Interested, which was worse. Doors were open. Then you also heard, Charles said, that I was right about the headlines. He tapped the phone in his palm. I'm not your enemy, Ms. Marsh, whatever the night is telling you. I'm the only person in this house thinking 3 moves past the photograph. Adrian is thinking about your feet hurting. Touching, but it won't survive contact with the markets. He slid the phone into his breast pocket. The offer will be generous. It will also be finite. Sleep on it. He left the card. Adrian crossed the room in 3 strides, took it off the chair arm before Elena could, and tore it once, cleanly, and let the halves fall on the globe's brass stand. "Get out of my library, Charles," he said, very quietly, "and call the East Terminal partners yourself tonight, and tell them the Vale name is about to be attached to a child, and if that frightens them out of the deal, then it was never a deal worth the name. I'll say it to their faces at 9. I'll say it to yours now." He was still quiet. The quiet had teeth in it. No one in this family prices her. Not again. Not while I'm the one whose name is on the building. Something flickered across the older man's face. Not defeat, Elena saw. Nothing so clean as that. A note taken. A recalculation filed away for later, when the room was less lit and the woman with the noticing face wasn't watching. Charles inclined his head a precise half-inch, the way you concede a point you have no intention of losing, and went out and shut the door with a softness more menacing than a slam. The 2 torn halves of the card sat on the brass. Neither of them looked at them. "He's not wrong about the photographs," Adrian said finally. He sounded exhausted. "That part's true. By morning your name will be in mouths you never agreed to be in. I can't stop that. I can only decide whether I stand next to it or behind it, and I'm done standing behind things. Elena, I did that in the study 4 months ago, and I have paid for it every day since in a currency you don't know about, because you weren't there to see the bill." "Then tell me what the bill was." "I will." He looked at her, and there was a promise in it, and also a fear, as if the telling were a door he wasn't sure the room behind was ready for. "Not on a night when Charles is downstairs and there are 200 phones on my lawn. Give me a clean day. Let me feed you something for once, instead of the other way around. There's a diner off the North Road that doesn't know who I am, or pretends not to, which in my life is the same as love, the old dryness, thin and real. 10 o'clock. I'll bring the freezer-burned souffle for moral support." She should say no. Everything practical in her, everything built out of 1 oven and 11 jobs to protect, leaned toward no. 10 o'clock, she said. "You buy. And you tell me the story, all of it, or I get in the van and you never chase it." "All of it," he said. "I promise you all of it." It was a promise he meant. She could hear that he meant it. She had learned once exactly how much Adrian Vale's silences cost, and now, walking out through the service door into the warm salt dark, the van coughing twice before it caught, she let herself wonder, dangerously, what his words might be worth. She got as far as the bottom of the Shell Drive before she understood the night was not finished with her. Vanessa's car was pulled onto the verge by the stone gate, hazards ticking amber in the dark, and Vanessa herself stood beside it in the silver dress, with her shoes in one hand, barefoot on the crushed shell like a woman who had already lost the part of the evening that required poise. She stepped into the van's headlights and lifted a hand, and Elena, because she was tired, because some reckless part of her wanted to see the knife in full light, stopped and rolled the window down. "You want to gloat," Elena said. "Do it fast. My feet hurt, and the van idles rough." "I don't want to gloat." Up close, Vanessa's face had come apart at the seams the terrace had held together. Younger, suddenly almost human, which Elena trusted less than the cruelty. "I want to tell you something, and you're not going to believe me, and in about a week you're going to wish you had. Then don't waste the gas. They've done this before." Vanessa's voice dropped. Quick, glancing back up the drive toward the lit house. "The family. Charles, not to me. I'm useful to them. God help me. I'm the girl on the next bluff. They'll never have to buy me off. To someone before you. There was a woman, years ago, before Adrian's mother took ill, and there was an arrangement, and a very generous gift, and that woman is somewhere with a house she didn't earn, and a signature she's not allowed to talk about. The amber hazards ticked between them. Ask him about Marn. Ask Adrian about the name Marn, and watch his face. Because he doesn't know I know it, and you'll be able to see in about half a second whether the man who put his jacket on your table has ever told you a whole true thing in his life. The words sat in the warm dark between them like a stone dropped in still water. "Man." Alina's hands tightened on the wheel. "Why?" she said. "Why would you hand me that?" "You spent the whole night trying to bury me under it, because I aimed at him and hit myself," Vanessa said, with a terrible dry honesty that was, Alina realized, the first fully true thing anyone in that family's orbit had said to her all night. "And because if I can't have the life they penciled me into, I would at least like to watch it be true for once, instead of managed." "Ask him about Marn." She stepped back out of the headlights, shoes still in her hand. 10 o'clock at the diner won't feel so simple now, will it? Alina's foot came off the brake on its own. "How do you know about the diner?" But Vanessa was already turning away toward her ticking car, barefoot on the shell, silver going grey in the dark, and she didn't answer. And the gate lamp threw her shadow long across the white drive and then swallowed it. Alina drove the quarter-mile of hissing shell to the county road, with both hands white on the wheel and the word Marn turning over and over in the noise of the engine like a coin she couldn't stop flipping. Behind her, the Vale house burned gold on its bluff, 200 candles and one torn card, and a man who had promised her all of it. Ahead of her, the North Road ran dark toward the city, and a diner she was no longer sure she should sit down in. She had walked into a borrowed kitchen 3 weeks ago, telling herself it was one afternoon. She had walked onto a terrace tonight, telling herself it was one July night. And now, with the harbour wind coming through the window and the secret finally out of her body and into the mouths of strangers, she understood that there had never been such a thing, with this family, as one of anything, that every door she'd been sure led out had only ever led further in. 10 o'clock, she thought. And what she would ask him first was not about the study, or the merger, or the child, or even the 4 months. It would be one name, and she already knew, from the ticking amber dark, that whatever his face did when she said it, it would either be the beginning of trusting him, or the end of it. The van's headlights found the county road. She turned toward the city, and did not let herself look back at the gold. The photograph found her before the coffee did. Elena had slept maybe 2 hours, in the narrow bed under the window unit that ran all night against the July heat, and she woke at 6 to her phone lit up on the sill like a small blue fire. Priya had sent it without a word, which was how Elena knew it was bad. A single image, cropped from someone's story feed, the Vale Terrace, 200 candles gone soft in the frame, and in the center of it a man's pale summer jacket laid across a caterer's champagne table, and behind the table a woman with both hands flat on the linen and her chin up. You couldn't see Elena's face clearly. You didn't need to. The caption did the rest. Vale Heir? Billionaire covers mystery caterer at own gala. She set the phone face down on the sill and breathed the way the midwife had taught her. In for 4, hold, out for 6, while the sprinkler-less city hummed 6 floors down, and the smell of hot asphalt and somebody's early bacon came up through the screen. The phone buzzed again. Priya, this time in words. Are you okay? Don't read the comments. Also the ricotta people called. They saw it. They want to book us for a christening they don't even have a baby for yet. Elena, Are you okay? I'm okay, she typed. Which was the small dishonesty she performed a dozen times a day now, retired Lusa. Hold the shop. I'll be in by 2. Where are you going before 2? Elena looked at the clock. 3 hours and 40 minutes until a diner off the North Road that didn't know who Adrian Vale was, or pretended not to, which in his life was the same as love. To hear a story, she wrote, and turned the phone off entirely, and stood in the grey heat of her own kitchen, with one hand pressed low against the curve she no longer had any reason to hide, and let herself be afraid of exactly one thing at a time. The word was still there when she closed her eyes. It had been there all night, turning over in the dark like a coin she couldn't stop flipping. Man, she would ask him first. Before the study, before the merger, before the 4 months. One name, and she would watch his face. Because Vanessa had been right about one cruel thing on that Shell drive, A face tells you in half a second whether the man across from you has ever handed you a whole true thing in his life. She dressed in the linen shirt that still fit and drove the van north with the windows down. The diner sat where the county road bent away from the water, a low silver box with a hand-painted sign and a gravel lot, and it smelled, when she pushed the door open, exactly like every good cheap kitchen she had ever loved: burnt coffee, griddle fat, the sweet chemical bite of pancake syrup warming on a hot plate. A ceiling fan pushed the heat around without convincing it to leave. A radio behind the counter played something with too much steel guitar. Adrian was already in the corner booth, and he had come, she saw, in a grey t-shirt and jeans. No watch, no armor. A man doing a fair impression of nobody. In front of him on the chipped formica sat a small foil-wrapped brick, frost still ghosting the edges of it in the air conditioning. "You brought it," she said, sliding in across from him. "I told you I would." Moral support. He nudged the frozen sofa an inch toward the center of the table, a small pale monument to the worst thing she had ever baked. It has not improved. If anything, it's gotten more sure of itself. Despite everything, despite the photograph, despite the coin turning in the dark, the corner of her mouth moved. "You kept it in a freezer worth more than my van. It's the most honest thing in that penthouse. I wasn't going to evict it." He turned his coffee cup a quarter turn on its saucer, a small steadying habit she remembered from midnight kitchens, and the ease went out of him by degrees. "You didn't sleep. Neither did you." "No." A waitress came, poured her a coffee she wouldn't drink, and a water she would, and went. And the radio filled the space where the next thing had to start. Adrian put both hands flat on the table, the way she had put hers on the linen the night before, and she understood he had noticed that too, and was giving it back to her on purpose. "I said I'd tell you all of it." So, the study. 4 months ago. Adrian. Let me. I've said it to myself so many times I've worn a path in it. He looked at the frost melting off the foil. "You heard Charles tell me to send you a generous gift and be done. You heard me say nothing. And you filled the nothing with the worst thing, and you left a note on the island, and I don't blame you for the arithmetic. It's the arithmetic anyone sane would have done." His jaw worked. "But you left before the part where I found my voice. You want the bill I paid? Here it is. I let you walk, because for about 90 seconds I believed him. My mother was in a bad turn that same night. The board had me by the throat over the East Terminal financing, and Charles said the one sentence that has run my family for 40 years. The name can't afford it. And for 90 seconds, I was my father, standing in a doorway, watching the woman eye. He stopped. Started again, quieter, watching you work and doing nothing. The ceiling fan ticked. The griddle hissed. Elena did not touch the coffee. And after the 90 seconds, I went and found Charles in the hall and told him that if he ever again priced a person I loved, I would take the East Terminal deal, which is the thing he has wanted for 11 years, and set fire to it in front of the partners. And he told me you were already gone. Adrian's hands closed slowly on the table. You'd left the note. You were faster than my 90 seconds, Elena. You always were. You'd read the room, and you were out the service door before I'd finished being brave too late. She had come in braced for a man who would defend himself. She had not braced for one who would hand her the ugliest 90 seconds of his life across a formica table and let her look at them. It was, she realized with a low lurch under her ribs, that was not the heat, a false floor, and she was standing on it, and it felt for one bright, treacherous moment like relief. You could have found me, she said. 11 figures. You said it yourself. You're excellent at knowing where things are. I know. He didn't flinch from it. I let you have the exit because I thought it was the one kind thing left to give you. I thought she got out clean, before my family could put a number on her. I told myself that was love. He shook his head once. It was cowardice wearing love's coat. I've had 4 months to learn the difference. I'm not going to make you the same mistake twice. And there it was, the warmth coming up through the tiredness like heat through a stovetop, clean and almost welcome, and she wanted, God help her, to lean into it. To let the frozen souffle and the 90 seconds and the grey t-shirt be the whole true story. So she made herself say the name. Tell me about Marn. She watched his face the way Vanessa had told her to, and Vanessa had been right about the half second. It took less. The coffee cup stopped its quarter turn. Something behind his eyes went very still and very old. The look of a man who hears a door open in a wing of the house he has kept locked so long he has stopped hearing it as a door. Where? He said. Low. Did you get that name? Does it matter? It matters a great deal, because 4 people alive know that name and 3 of them are paid not to. His hands had gone flat and white on the table. Elena, where woman gave it to me barefoot on a Shell drive at 11 o'clock last night. She held his eyes. She said your family has done this before, that there was an arrangement, a very generous gift, a house someone didn't earn, and a signature she isn't allowed to talk about. She said, ask him about Marn and watch whether he's ever told you a whole true thing. The steel guitar soared on behind the counter. So, I'm asking, and I'm watching. Who is Marn? For a long moment he didn't answer, and she thought he might not. Thought he might reach for the polished thing he did in boardrooms, the deflection wrapped in charm. Instead he pushed the coffee aside as though it were in the way of something, and he told her. Marnie was the woman my father loved, he said. Not my mother. Before my mother, and, for a while I think after. A painter. She had a studio on the North Shore, and she smelled of turpentine and oranges, and she was the only person in my whole childhood who talked to me like I was a person, and not an heir. His voice had gone flat and careful. The voice a man uses to carry something over water. When my father was gone, Charles found a stack of letters and a promise my father had made her, on paper, in his own hand. A house, an income, a place in the family for as long as she lived. And Charles decided the name couldn't afford her. So he drew up an agreement, a very generous gift, and a clause that said she was never, under any circumstance, to speak the Vale name aloud again. He finally looked up, and the tired under the beautiful was all the way to the surface now. She signed it. She's alive, and comfortable, and silent, in a house on a bluff that isn't ours, and I have not been allowed to see her since I was 19. That's Marn. That's the arrangement. Charles keeps the template in a drawer. He's proud of it. He calls it the family's soft landing. The fan turned. Elena's coffee had gone cold in its cup. She understood, sitting there, why Vanessa had handed her the name like a lit match. Because it wasn't only a story about a man's cruelty. It was a blueprint. It was the shape of the thing that would come for her next, and it already had a name, and a drawer, and a proud old man who'd run it before. You were 19, she said slowly. You knew, all these years, you knew your family had a paper for making a woman disappear. And I knew. He didn't dodge it. And I did nothing. For years, because she was already gone and I told myself it was too late to undo. That's the same disease I caught in the study 4 months ago, Elena. It runs in us. My father watched. I watched. I have spent my whole life learning how to watch. It should have been the moment the floor gave way. It nearly was. But the thing that undid her wasn't his confession. It was what she saw on the seat beside him, half under his forearm, that she had taken until now for a menu. A folder. Cream-colored. Heavy stock. The exact weight and color of the card Charles had set on the arm of her chair the night before. What's that? She said. Adrian followed her eyes, and something crossed his face that she couldn't read fast enough. Not guilt. She'd have known guilt. but a kind of hopeful dread. "I had our people draw something up overnight," he said. "For you. For the—" he stopped, chose the word. "For the child. Protection. A trust. Security. Your business insulated from whatever the press does to it, so that whatever you decide about me, you and it are never at anyone's mercy again. It's the opposite of Marn, Alina. It's the paper I should have torn up when I was 19, made into its own reverse." He slid it across the formica, past the melting souffle, and for 1 second his face was so open and so hopeful that she almost couldn't bear to reach for it. She reached for it. She had built Marsh & Co. Out of 1 rented oven and 11-hour days and 100 leases she'd read line by line at 2 in the morning, because no one else was going to read them for her. Rosa had said it in the corridor 3 weeks ago. "You've got a face that notices." Her eyes went down the first page. The warm, reassuring language. The trust, the security. The numbers that were, she had to admit, more than fair. And then to the second page, where the language always went, in every lease she'd ever caught a landlord in, and the fan turned overhead, and the steel guitar played, and the floor she'd been standing on all morning quietly, completely, gave way. "Adrian." Her voice came out level, which frightened her more than shouting would have. "Who drafted this?" "Our counsel, the family, Charles's lawyers. They're the firm we use, they." He heard it as he said it. She watched him hear it. Page 2. She turned the folder around and slid it back and put her finger on the clause, on the small, dense paragraph tucked under the generous one. "Read me clause 9. Out loud, the part about family oversight of any minor bearing the Vale name and good faith confidentiality regarding the circumstances of the family. Read me the line about who has final say if there's ever a, what's the phrase, a disagreement as to the child's interests." Her finger didn't shake. That was the thing she'd hold on to later. "Read me whose name is on that line, Adrian, because it isn't yours, and it isn't mine." He read it. She watched the color go out of him the way it had gone out of Vanessa on the terrace when the knife came back around. "It's Charles's," he said. "It's the Marn paper." She sat back. The vinyl of the booth stuck to her arms in the heat. You changed the language on page 1, and they changed it back on page 2. A very generous gift, and a clause that means the family decides. "You brought me the soft landing, Adrian. You brought it to me across a table with a frozen souffle. And you didn't even read it, because you have spent your whole life trusting the machine that made you, and it drafts these in its sleep." Her throat ached, but her voice stayed flat as a countertop. "You put my name exactly where hers was. And you didn't even know." Elena, he was already reaching for it, tearing at page 2, as if unmaking the paper could unmake the fact of it. "I didn't see it. I swear to you I didn't see it. I told them to protect you. I never read. That's worse." She heard how quiet she'd gone. Quiet the way he got quiet when a room got loud. "Don't you understand that's worse? Charles at least looks me in the eye when he prices me. You handed me a cage and called it a garden because you couldn't be bothered to read to page 2 of my whole life. That's not cruelty. That's the thing that made Marn. That's the watching. You've just proven you're still doing it, an hour after you swore you'd stopped." The waitress drifted toward them with the coffee pot, read the table in a single professional glance, and drifted away. The souffle had gone to a slick of foil and water between them. "Give me until tonight," Adrian said, low and fast, the folder crushed in one hand now. "I'll fire the firm. I'll draft it myself, in my own hand. No clause, 9. Nothing my family can touch. You'll do it fast, and too late." Like the study. She was already gathering her keys. 90 seconds after I'm out the door. That's not fair. No. It isn't. She stopped, half out of the booth, and gave him the one true thing she had left, because she was so tired of the small dishonesties. It isn't fair, Adrian, and it's also exactly right, and both of those can be true, which is the part your family has never once believed. Her hand found the low curve of herself without deciding to. I came here this morning, wanting to trust you. I want you to know that. I sat down in this booth, ready to hand it back. And then you slid a folder across the table that proves the machine loves you too much to ever let you protect anyone from it, and you at the wheel of it, half asleep. Then teach me to read to page 2. He said it plainly, no charm on it at all, and it landed harder than any argument. I'm not asking you to trust the machine. I'm asking you to trust that I'll learn to burn the parts of it that need burning. Man is alive because I was too young and too much a coward. You're not going to be another quiet house on another bluff. Not while I have breath and a name on a building. For 1 second. She wavered. The false floor and the true one felt, in the July heat, like the same board. Then, her phone, which she had turned off at 6 and turned back on in the gravel lot out of habit, buzzed against the formica, and buzzed again, and again, the stacked hum of a voicemail and a wall of texts arriving all at once, and she looked down at the screen out of the same reflex that made her read leases at 2 in the morning, and the floor she thought had already given way opened 1 level deeper. East Terminal pulled out overnight. Priya had written. It's everywhere. They're saying it's you. Elena, they are printing your name, and under it, a business headline someone had screenshotted, the kind of cool grey sentence that Charles Vale composed the way other men breathed. Vale Group's landmark East Terminal deal collapses hours after gala scandal. Sources cite reputational exposure tied to undisclosed personal entanglement. And under that, a voicemail. Unknown number. 2 minutes long, left at 9:14 that morning, while she was driving north with the windows down, while Adrian was already waiting in the corner booth with a frozen souffle and a folder he hadn't read. She looked up at him. Charles's associate, she said. The one from the card you tore. She left me a message at 9:14. Her thumb hovered over it. You told him to call the partners himself, last night, in the library. You said, tell them the name is about to be attached to a child. And if it frightens them out of the deal, then it was never worth the name. She watched his face. It frightened them out of the deal, Adrian, by 9 o'clock. And by 9:14 your uncle's associate was calling to explain what generosity looks like when it's done correctly. He wouldn't. Adrian stopped, because of course he would. Because they both knew, sitting in a silver box off the county road with the fan pushing the heat around, that Charles Vale had not been beaten in that library last night. He had taken a note. He had filed a recalculation, for later, and he had spent the hours since building a world in which the East Terminal deal was gone. The fault was Elena's. The family name was bleeding in the morning press, and the only bandage on offer was a cream-colored folder with a clause 9. The exact instrument now sitting torn in Adrian's fist, its twin no doubt clean and waiting on the associate's desk. He knew, Elena said slowly, and the cold of it went all the way down. He knew about this diner. Vanessa knew about this diner. How do you know about the diner? I asked her, and she wouldn't answer, and I drove off before I made her. She met his eyes. He didn't lose last night, Adrian. He let you win the library so you'd bring me here this morning, feeling safe, feeling brave, and slide him exactly the collapse he needed to price me properly. He used your 90 seconds of courage as the fuse. Adrian had gone very still. The billionaire who out-talked every room in the country sat in a vinyl booth with no argument in his mouth at all, and she watched him understand that the machine he'd sworn he would learn to burn had already run one full cycle around them both before either of them had ordered breakfast. Play the voicemail, he said. Hoarse. No. She stood, keys in her fist, the low ache in her back and the lower ache under her ribs and the whole grey weight of the morning standing up with her. I'm not going to play his voice into the one room this summer where you didn't have anything on your wrist to check the time. You want to know what generosity done correctly sounds like? Come sit at my kitchen table with the window unit and the leases and read the fine print for once in your life, and then you'll know. She slid a 5 under the cold coffee, because she paid her own way. Because everything in that van was hers, including the thing they were trying to buy a share of. But not today. Today, the deal you set fire to landed on me, and your uncle is already on my phone with the match still warm, and I need to go stand in my own kitchen and figure out how to keep 11 people employed through an autumn that just got a great deal colder. Elena, he was on his feet too, the folder crushed, the souffle forgotten, and the diner's few other customers had begun, in the way of small rooms, to feel the weather at the corner booth. Don't drive off before my 90 seconds again. I'm asking you. That's the whole thing I'm asking. Give me the length of one day to be brave on time. She stopped at the door with the July glare white behind the glass, and the steel guitar soaring, and the smell of the griddle in her hair, and she gave him the last true thing, the one that cost. You keep asking for a clean day, she said. A clean day at the diner. A clean day to tell the story. A clean day to be brave. Adrian, there is no clean day. There was never going to be. Not with this family. Not with this name. Not with a child that half the markets now think is a line item in a deal that fell apart before breakfast. Her hand was on the door. That's the thing I understood on the Shell drive last night, and you still haven't. Every door I've been sure led out of your world has only ever led further in. And I'm standing in the last doorway I've got, and I am telling you I don't know yet whether I'm walking out of it or all the way through. Then don't decide at the door, he said. Decide when you've read to page 2. That's all I know. She almost smiled. It didn't reach the tired. You want me to notice everything before I run. It's a good instinct. You should try it on your own paperwork. And she pushed out into the gravel and the heat, and the door swung shut on the fan and the radio, and the man standing among the wreckage of a breakfast his uncle had catered from 3 moves away. The van coughed twice before it caught. She sat with both hands on the wheel, and the phone burning in the cup holder, the voicemail still unplayed, the headline still glowing, the word "man" finally quiet at last, only because a louder thing had come to stand beside it. Through the diner's window she could see Adrian, not sitting back down, not chasing her out to the lot, but standing very still with his phone already at his ear. Calling Charles, she thought, or the firm, or the East Terminal partners, or all of them, and for the first time in 18 months she genuinely could not tell whether the man on the phone was about to burn the machine down or feed it. That was the thing she carried out of the gravel lot and onto the county road with the harbour going hard blue and enormous on her right. Not the folder, not the deal, not even the name, just the plain, unbearable fact that she no longer knew. Watching him through a smeared diner window, which Adrian Vale was about to make the next call, and that by the time she found out, whatever he decided would already have her name on it, and the child's, and no note left on any island in the world would be fast enough to take it back. She turned toward the city. Her phone buzzed one more time against the plastic. Not Priya now, not the associate, but a number she knew. A number she'd stood beside in a stone corridor that smelled of beeswax and lilies. Rosa, 3 words, sent from a house on a bluff where 200 candles had burned the night before. Come back, please, and under it, before Elena could even breathe. It's his mother. She's asking for you by name. The van idled rough at the stop sign, where the county road met the highway, city to the left, bluff to the right, the whole summer shimmering off the asphalt in both directions. Elena sat with her foot on the brake and one hand low against the curve that had undone the careful architecture of her entire life, and understood that the choice she'd sworn she was making at a diner door had never been hers to make at a diner door at all. She had told the rearview mirror it was one afternoon. She had told it one July night. And now, with the engine shaking under her, and a housekeeper's 3 words on the screen, and a woman she had never met asking for her by name from a sick room on a bluff, she finally stopped lying to the mirror. She put on her signal. She turned right. The estate looked different in daylight. The 200 candles were gone, the lanterns down. The white roses along the balustrade, already browning at their edges in the heat, and the crushed shell drive that had hissed her toward the house 3 weeks ago, now blazed white under a noon sun that gave nothing back. Cicadas soared in the cedars. The fountain threw its little cool noise into air that had none to spare. Elena parked the van at an angle no valet would have allowed, and sat for one breath with both hands on the wheel. In for 4, hold, out for 6, and then she went up the wide front steps she'd never once been permitted to use. Because Rosa was already there holding the door. You came. Rosa's silver hair had come loose at one temple, and there was flour on nothing today. Only a plain grey dress, and the ring of keys, and a face that had been up as long as Elena's. I wasn't sure you would. I wouldn't have blamed the road for keeping you. You said she's asking for me by name. Elena stepped into the cool that smelled of beeswax and lilies, and, under it now, of something medicinal and clean. I don't understand how she knows my name at all. You'll find she knows a great deal more than that. She always has. Rosa took her wrist the way she had the night before, warm and dry, and steered her not toward the library, but up a curving stair, past portraits of Vales who had all learned the same watchful expression, toward a wing Elena had no business in. Mind the runner. It slides. Adrian's not here. He's in the city tearing his own lawyers apart on the telephone, which is a thing I've waited 11 years to hear him do. Her mouth pressed flat. She sent him away on purpose. She wanted you first. Rosa, is she? She's had the illness at her a long while, and it's tired her, and this morning she woke sharper than she's been in a month, which the nurse says happens, and which I've stopped letting myself read anything into. Rosa stopped at a panelled door with light leaking gold beneath it. She's little strength to spend. Don't let the voice fool you into thinking otherwise. And Elena, the key's stilled. Whatever she says to you in there, she's earned the right to say it. And you've earned the right to answer back. Don't be soft with her. She's had a lifetime of people being soft with her, and it's done her no good at all. Then she opened the door, and stood back, and did not follow her in. The room was full of sea light. Someone had opened the tall windows to the lawn that rolled green and gold to the blue line of the Sound, and the harbour breeze came in warm and salt, and moved the sheer curtains. And in a high bed banked with pillows, sat a woman, who had once been exactly as beautiful as everything else in this house, and was now something harder to look away from than beauty. Silver hair brushed back. A silk robe the colour of weak tea. Cheekbones the illness had sharpened to a blade, and beneath them Adrian's eyes exactly, tired under the beautiful, missing nothing. So, said Margaret Vale, the caterer who doesn't salt her melon. Her voice was thin, but the edge on it was old money and full strength. Come where I can see you. My eyes are the last thing working properly, and I mean to use them. Elena crossed the sea-lit floor and stopped a respectful distance from the bed, hands folded at the front of her linen shirt, and did not, this time, angle her body away from anyone. You know about the melon, she said. I know about the melon, the trout, the souffle he keeps frozen like a fool, and a note left on a kitchen island 4 months ago that my son reads at night when he thinks the house is asleep. Margaret's gaze went down, unhurried, expert in a way that was nothing like Vanessa's, and came back up to Elena's face with something in it that was almost approval. And I know what you're carrying, because I am the one who moved your tasting to this house. The woman from the Vale account who called twice. That was my instruction. I wanted a look at the person who could make Adrian Vale ruin 4 plates, and then keep the evidence in a freezer for a year and a half. A thin breath. I did not expect to be looking at my own grandchild's mother. That, I confess, was more than I bargained for. The sea light moved on the ceiling. Somewhere below a door closed, and a car came up the shell drive, and neither of them looked toward the Sound. You brought me back on purpose, Elena said slowly. The tasting. All of it. I am an old woman with very little time to spend, and I have spent a great deal of it watching my son learn to be his father. Margaret's hand, all knuckle and pale skin, closed on the coverlet. I watched my husband love a woman named Marn, and let his brother put her in a house on a bluff with a paper across her mouth, and I said nothing, because I was the wife and the name could not afford a scene. And I have carried that silence for 30 years, like a stone I swallowed, and never passed. Her eyes did not leave Elena's. And then 4 months ago I watched Charles do it again to you, through my son, in my own study, while I lay 2 doors down too weak to stand, and I heard Adrian say nothing, exactly as his father said nothing, and I thought, it will go on forever. It will go on into the next one, and the next. Unless someone with the power to stop it finally spends it before she runs out. Mrs. Vale, Margaret. I have not got the strength for the whole surname today. A ghost of the dry humour, there and gone. Sit. You've been on your feet since a version of 2 o'clock that never ends for women who do real work, and I will not have my grandchild's mother swaying at my bedside like a reed. Sit, and I'll tell you the one thing Charles has spent 30 years praying I'd forget. Elena sat, in the chair pulled close to the bed, and the leather was warm from the sun, and the medicinal clean smell was under everything, and the curtains breathed. The Vale Trust, Margaret said, votes with me. It always has. My husband left it to me, and not to his brother, because even a watching man knew which of the 2 of us had a spine. Charles has run this family for 11 years, the way a steward runs a house while the owner's abroad, with my proxy, signed each spring. Because I was too tired, and too grieved, and too much a coward to attend the meetings myself. Her knuckles whitened on the coverlet. That proxy expires the moment I revoke it. I have never revoked it. Charles has arranged his whole life on the certainty that I never will. A breath, long and deliberate. This morning I telephoned my own lawyer, mine, not the family firm, and I revoked it. As of 10 o'clock, Charles Vale has exactly as much power over this family and its name as any other man his age with a good suit and a bad heart. Which is to say, none. The car in the drive had stopped. Below, a voice was rising, Charles's benefactor's tenor stripped of its felt, and under it, cutting through it, a quieter voice that got quieter as the other got louder, and Elena's whole body knew that voice before her mind named it. He's here, she said. I asked him here. Margaret's chin lifted, and for 1 second the illness fell off her like a dropped shawl and she was simply the woman who owned the floor everyone in that house stood on. And I asked Adrian to come back from the city. I wanted all 3 of you in one room while I still have the breath to run it. Ring the bell by the lamp, would you? Rosa will bring them up. The dry ghost again. I have staged better scenes than my son. He opens on a terrace with 200 witnesses. I prefer a small room and no way out. Elena rang the bell. They came up together, and hating it. Charles first. Phone still in his hand, the grey eyes doing arithmetic on the room before he'd cleared the door. Then Adrian behind him in the grey t-shirt and jeans he'd worn to the diner. No armour. The frozen Sofal's foil no longer in his hands, but something worse there instead. A folder. Cream-coloured, and Elena's stomach dropped until she saw that this one was torn, page 2 ripped clean out, and the rest gripped like a thing he meant to burn. Mother, Charles arranged his face. You should be resting. Whatever this is, I can... Sit down, Charles. Margaret did not raise her voice. Both of you. There by the window. No, not next to her. You've done enough standing next to women you mean to price. She waited until Charles, after a beat that cost him, lowered himself into the window seat, and Adrian did not sit at all, but went to stand behind Elena's chair, one hand coming to rest on its high leather back, not touching her, near enough that she could feel the warmth of it. Now, Adrian, what did you spend your morning doing while I revoked your uncle's proxy? Adrian went very still behind her. You did what? Answer the question first. What did you do? I fired the firm. His voice was rough, scraped down to the grain. All of them. I told the East Terminal partners the deal stays gone, that I set fire to it myself last night, and I'd do it again. And if the Vale name is only worth what it's worth to men made fearful by a coming heir, then it isn't worth the brass on the building. His hand tightened on the chair, and I drove to a storage room in the city where my uncle keeps a drawer he's proud of, and I took the template out of it. The soft landing. The Marn paper. Elena felt more than saw him lift the torn folder. I read to page 2. Elena. For the first time in my life I read to page 2. And then I read every version of it in that drawer, 30 years of them. And I put them in my car, and I am going to burn them in front of Marn herself with her permission, and tear up the clause that's kept her quiet since I was 19, so that she can say our name out loud in her own garden if she wants to spend the rest of her life shouting it. The room was very quiet. The curtains breathed. Charles had gone the color of the browning roses on the balustrade below. "You have no authority," Charles said, and his voice cracked on the last word in a way Elena had not heard from him once. Not on the terrace, not in the library. That drawer, that firm, the trust, Adrian. You are a signature on documents you have never once read. You do not run this family. I run this family. I have run it since your father, since my husband left it to me and not to you, Margaret said. Yes, I know. You've run it beautifully, Charles. You've run it into a shape where a woman carrying the only child of the next generation has her name in the morning markets, attached to a collapsed deal. And your answer, at 9:14 this morning, was to have your associate telephone her a price. She turned her head on the pillow toward Elena, and the sea light caught the wet in her eyes and did not let her hide it. You did receive that call, I think. You did not play it. Rosa told me you drove north instead of pressing a button, and that is the single most sensible thing anyone in the orbit of this family has done in 30 years. I don't take cards from men who've already decided how my story ends, Elena said quietly. I told him that last night. You did. He told me. He thought it charming. A practical woman, he said. She'll come round. Margaret's mouth thinned to a blade. Charles, look at me. I am too tired to say this twice, and I have wanted to say it for 30 years, so hear it while I've the wind for it. She waited until the grey eyes came up. It is finished. The proxy is revoked. The firm is dismissed on my authority as well as his. And the template dies in a garden this week. Forgive me. The template ends this week. Burned to nothing. There will be no soft landing for this child or its mother, because they are not falling. They are the only two people in the whole of this bluff, standing on their own feet. You will go home. You will keep the house you earned, and none of the power you borrowed. And if you ever again set a cream-colored card on a chair beside a woman my son loves, I will spend what strength I have left, making certain the last public act of my life is the correction of yours. Charles stood. For a long moment he was simply an old man, in a good suit, in a room full of sea light, doing arithmetic that came out, for the first time in 11 years, to nothing at all. He looked at Margaret, and at Adrian standing behind Elena's chair, with his hand on the leather, and last at Elena herself. And whatever recalibration he filed away this time, he filed with the knowledge that there was no later left to spend it in. You'll regret spending it all at once, he said to his sister-in-law. You always kept something back. It's why you outlasted him. I kept it back for this, Margaret said. Go home, Charles. And he went, not with the soft, menacing click he'd given the library door, but with nothing. An old man's ordinary footsteps down a curving stair, and a car on the shell drive that started on the first turn, because everything Charles Vale owned started on the first turn. And then the sound of it hissing away down the quarter-mile of white, growing thinner and gone. For a moment no one spoke. The cicadas filled it. The harbour breeze moved the curtains and brought in the green smell of the cut lawn and the salt under it. And Margaret Vale sank back into her pillows as though the scene had taken exactly the reserve she'd warned it might. "There," she said, faintly, eyes closed. "I have been wanting to do that since before either of you could vote." A thin breath. "Adrian, come here." He came around the chair and sat on the edge of the high bed and took his mother's knuckled hand in both of his, and the sight of it, the man who owned half the skyline, made small and young by one thin hand, put an ache under Alina's ribs that had nothing to do with the child. "I watched you say nothing in that study," Margaret told her son, low, "and it was the worst hour of an illness full of bad ones, because I knew exactly where you'd learned it. From two men who spent their whole lives at the edge of rooms, watching people they loved do the living, you very nearly kept the tradition." Her eyes opened. "But you drove to a storage room this morning and read to page 2. Do you understand what that cost the men in your blood? Everything. It cost them everything. And you did it before lunch." A ghost of the dry humor, the last of her strength, poured into it. "I can rest now. I've been waiting to see whether you'd be a Vale or something better. You're something better. Took you 31 years. Your father never managed it at all. Mother, don't. I've no wind for a scene from you as well." She turned her head and found Elena, and the imperiousness went out of the sea-colored eyes and left something plainer. "You, come here too. I want one look at the pair of you close enough to see it properly, because it's the only wedding I'm likely to attend, and I intend to enjoy it out of turn." Elena rose and crossed the warm floor and stood beside Adrian at the edge of the bed, and Margaret Vale looked from one of them to the other, unhurried, expert, the way she'd looked at the melon, and whatever she saw seemed to satisfy a hunger 30 years old. "He'll be slow," she told Elena. "He'll want a clean day for everything, and there's no such thing, as I expect you've told him." "I told him at a diner door this morning," Elena said, and heard her own voice come out unsteady for the first time all day. "Good. Keep telling him." Margaret's hand found Elena's and pressed it, papery and cool and startlingly strong. "You have a face that notices." Rosa said so, and Rosa is never wrong about faces, only about how much salt goes in the bechamel. "Notice him. He's spent his life among people who watched him for what he was worth. Notice him for what he is." Her eyes slid shut again, but she was smiling, the barest edge of it. "Now take him out of my sea light and go be brave somewhere I don't have to supervise it. Rosa will bring me my tea and lie to me about how tired I look. Go on, both of you." They went down the curving stair with the portraits watching and out through the tall front doors, the ones Alina had never been allowed to use, onto the wide steps where the noon had softened toward afternoon, and the cicadas had eased, and the harbour lay flat and enormous and blue below the browning roses. Adrian stopped on the top step. He still had the torn folder in one hand. He looked at it as though he'd forgotten it was there, and then he looked at Elena, and for once the man who out-talked every room in the country had nothing polished ready at all. "I read to page 2, he said. "I heard. No, I mean." He turned the folder over. His jaw worked. "I read to page 2, and I understood, sitting in that storage room with 30 years of these things in my lap, that you were right about the worst thing. Charles looks a person in the eye when he prices them. I handed you a cage across a Formica table, and I called it a garden, and I hadn't even read it, because I trusted the machine that raised me the way you trust a floor. You told me that. This morning. And I drove straight into the exact proof of it." He set the folder down on the stone step between them, deliberately, the way he'd laid his jacket on the champagne table. "So here's the whole true thing. And there's no clause 9 in it, and I wrote it myself in the car, with a pen that skips, so it's ugly, which is the only way you'll believe it's mine." He drew a single folded sheet from his back pocket. Ballpoint, blotched, a man's bad handwriting crowding the lines. "It's not a trust," he said. "You'll never sign another paper this family drafts as long as you live. I've made sure of that. It's a list." He didn't hand it to her. He held it, and his hand was not quite steady. Everything I should have said in the study, and didn't. Everything I should have said in the hotel corridor and was 90 seconds too slow for. I'm not going to read it to you on a step. I'm going to leave it in your van, under the souffle, which I also put in your van, because it is the most honest thing I own, and it belongs with you now. The corner of his mouth moved, tired, real, but the top line I'll say out loud, because you deserve to watch my face while I say it. The way you watched it when you said the name Marn. So watch it. The harbor breeze came up the steps, salt and cedar, and cut grass, and moved the loose sheet in his hand, and Alina did the thing she had refused to do across a champagne table, and a formica booth, and a stone corridor. She watched his face, all of it, the tired under the beautiful, the fear behind the eyes, and she did not angle a single degree of herself away. I let you leave once, because I told myself it was the kindest thing I had, Adrian said. It was cowardice in love's coat, and it took me 4 months, and a storage room full of my family's paper to learn the difference. I don't want a clean day anymore. There isn't one. I want the actual days, the van that won't start, and the window unit, and the leases at 2 in the morning, and the page 2s. All of them, read out loud, together, out of your world and mine both, wherever the two of us decide the doors go from here. His voice dropped, and the last of the polish went with it. I love you, Alina, not the story of you. Not the caterer who saved the auction. You, the one who didn't drop the flute. I have loved you since the 4 ruined plates, and I was too much my father's son to say it in time, and I'm saying it now on a step where anyone could hear, because I am done. Entirely done. Saying nothing at all. The cicadas had gone quiet. Somewhere behind them in the sea-lit house a kettle was beginning, faintly, to sing. Elena did not answer with words for a moment, because the subtext of 18 months and 4 months and one long July morning was standing between them, and words felt too small to lift it. She reached out instead, and took the ugly blotched sheet from his unsteady hand, and folded it once more along its crease, and pressed it flat against the low curve of herself, where the whole unmanageable future was. And only then did she let the tears come, the ones she'd refused on a terrace, and in a library, and at a diner door. You wrote to page 2, she said. In a car. With a pen that skips. It's the worst handwriting in the tri-state area. My CFO would resign. Good, she laughed, wet and cracked, and the laugh undid the last knot of the morning. Because I've read 100 leases by a window unit, and I can tell you exactly what a document's worth by how honest it is about its own bad parts, Adrian, and this one is the most honest thing you've ever handed me. She lifted her chin and gave him the top line back, the way he'd given her his, out loud, on a step where anyone could hear. I sat down in that booth this morning ready to hand you my trust and take it back the second you proved you'd earned it, and lost it in the same hour. And I drove off, and turned right at a stop sign I had no reason to turn right at. And I've been telling myself all day it was because of your mother. She shook her head. It wasn't. It was because I noticed you through a diner window with a phone at your ear, and I couldn't tell which call you were about to make, and I realized I wanted, more than I've wanted anything since the 4 plates, to be in the room when you made it. That's the whole thing. I wanted to be in the room, so notice me back, and read your own paperwork, and let's go be brave on time for once, both of us. He reached up, slow, giving her every degree of the way to refuse it, and cupped the side of her face with one hand, and she leaned into it instead of away, and the harbor breeze came up warm off the water, and neither of them said the word love again, because it had been said, and it had cost, and it did not need saying twice. They were still standing like that when Rosa put her head out the tall front door, keys jingling, entirely unsurprised. Well, she said, to no one, to the Roses, to 30 years. About time somebody in this family read to page 2. She let the door swing wide behind her. Your mother wants her tea, and she wants it brought by the pair of you, together, Because she says if she has to be lied to about how tired she looks, she'd at least like to be lied to by people who are finally telling the truth about everything else. A sniff that fooled nobody. And mind the third step. He still never had it seen to. The East Terminal deal did not come back, and no one on the bluff spent a single afternoon mourning it. By the time the first cool nights of September edged the harbor, the Vale name was attached in the markets, not to a collapse, but to a small and unfashionable thing. A foundation, in Margaret Vale's name, while she was still there to enjoy the fuss of it. That put professional kitchens into community centers and paid caterers a fair rate to teach in them, chaired by a woman who had built a company out of one rented oven and refused, on principle, to let anyone else's board vote on her recipes. Marn came to the bluff in October. Adrian had driven to the North Shore house himself, alone, with a car full of 30 years of cream-colored paper, and had burned every page of it in an oil drum in her garden, while she watched with her arms folded and her white hair loose. And then he had torn up the claws across her mouth in front of her own lawyer, and she had said the Vale name aloud, once, experimentally, to the winter sea, and then a great many times, laughing, until it stopped being a stone she'd swallowed and became only a word. She smelled, still, of turpentine and oranges. She and Margaret sat in the sea-lit room for a whole afternoon, saying things 30 years overdue, and Rosa brought them tea and lied to both of them about how tired they looked, and Elena, passing in the corridor with her hand low against a curve that had stopped being a secret and started being a promise, heard the two of them laughing through the panelled door, like women who had finally set down something they'd carried too far. Vanessa Cole did not become a friend, because some things the shell drive brakes stay broken, but a card arrived at Marsh & Co. In the slow grey part of autumn, no creamstock, plain, a single line in a hand that had clearly practiced not sounding cruel. I aimed at him and hit myself, and it was the best miss of my life. Name it something that isn't Vanessa. Elena kept it in the drawer under the leases, next to a folded sheet in ballpoint that skipped, and did not name the baby Vanessa, but did, quietly, forgive her, which cost less than she'd expected, and bought more. The child came in the deep of winter. In that hospital, the staff pretended not to know whose it was, which in that family was the same as love. A girl. She was, by every account of everyone permitted in the room, entirely and boringly healthy, furious about the cold, in the way of all new arrivals, and instantly, completely warm the moment she was wrapped and held. And she had, Rosa announced with enormous satisfaction, a face that noticed. Margaret was there, in a chair by the window, wrapped in a robe the colour of weak tea, holding on to see it, and stubbornly going on holding well past every doctor's arithmetic, and when they put the baby in her arms, she looked down for a long time, and then up at Elena, with the sea light of a whole other season in her eyes. "There," she said. "That's the wedding and the christening and 30 years, all at once. I told you I'd attend out of turn, a ghost of the dry humour, undimmed. She's got the Vale eyes and none of the Vale watching. See that she keeps it that way." They married in the spring, on the terrace, when the white roses came back, a small thing, no gala, no 200 candles, the quartet replaced by a friend of Priya's with a guitar and too much steel in it. Adrian made a joke in his own vows. One, small and dry and startling, about a man who ruins 4 plates trying, and the whole terrace laughed, and Elena reacted to the novelty of it exactly as his mother had predicted she would, which made her laugh again, and the sound of it went out over the harbour, indifferent and salt and warm. In the freezer of the house on the bluff, next to the ice for 200 imaginary galas that would never need it, there is still a small foil-wrapped brick, frost ghosting its edges, freezer burned to a monument. Neither of them has ever thrown it away. On the worst mornings, the ones with the window units of the old life still humming somewhere in memory, one of them will open the freezer and look at it and shut the door again, and the other will know exactly what that means without a word, because they have both, finally, learned to read all the way to page 2. If this story warmed something in you, if you believe, the way this channel believes, that the quiet ones who notice everything are the strongest people in any room, and that it is never, ever too late to find your voice and read to the very last line. Then take a moment to subscribe and stay a while. There are more stories like this one waiting for you here, and we'd love for you to hear them. Until the next one, be the kind of person who ruins 4 plates trying. It matters more than you know.